Welcome to day 4 of the Be Whole Challenge. Today we are looking at your heart, your emotional health. This is an area where many of us may get support, outside support to help us in tending to our heart. When we think about our experience here in this country as African people, melanated people, we've experienced a lot of trauma collectively. And as means to survive, we had to shut down or dismiss a lot of what we felt because it didn't matter at the time, if we were hurt or sad or angry. And unless, your people, your ancestors, your family made a conscious effort to begin to mature in this area, what we see now is a lot of us still using a lot of those means of survival, even now, even when we aren't experiencing the same conditions as we did hundreds of years ago. And so when we look at tending to our emotions, we want to look at the fact that many of us don't really even have an extensive emotional vocabulary. We know when we're sad, maybe angry, happy, but there are so many things, so many other emotions that we could be experiencing. And behind anger may be embarrassment. Oftentimes we aren't able to identify those things because we simply weren't given the vocabulary very early. And so we grow up to be teenagers and young adults and into adulthood, really handling our emotions the same way, unless we are intentional about growing in this area. And so when we look at, oftentimes when we've experienced some level of trauma, and trauma doesn't have to be something that is big. It can be just like seeing something that you weren't supposed to see as a child, or feeling embarrassed in a moment, and it really shook you. When we look at experiencing trauma, unless we are given the tools to process the experience, many of us tend to respond, as a way to survive. In the, you probably have heard of the flight, fight, or freeze response. And when we look at our emotions and we respond in flight mode, this is where you see people who kind of blow up and get angry and kind of go off, or physically fight someone or fight them with their words, right? When we think about flight, where we run away, oftentimes we avoid what we are feeling, maybe suppress what we're feeling, push down what we're feeling, act like it didn't even happen, forget about it altogether. And then when we look at freeze, sometimes what this looks like is when people are really stuck in the experience. They still feel the pain. Hey, Tia. You're stuck in the pain of the experience. So even though time has passed, you still feel like it happened yesterday, And all of these things really help you or prevent you from living in the present, being able to be open to new experiences, allow us to really just unhealthy ways to take care of our emotions, but it really is just our nature if we don't know any different. And so we want to allow ourselves to grow in this area, giving ourselves the time to feel, one, and process what we're feeling before we react. So thinking about ways to tend to your emotional health, oftentimes if we knew how to do it, we would, right? So getting support, whether it's having a therapist or a life coach. Oftentimes we vent and we share with our family and friends who are not therapists, who are not life coaches, and so they are great listeners, but sometimes it doesn't really help us to really decide what it is that we want to do to move from that place. So having a professional of sorts to help you, one, not only talk about what you're feeling, but maybe help you identify that you actually feel. Because a lot of times when we experience something, we talk about it as if we're reading the newspaper and just sharing a story, as opposed to even using words about how we feel. And even though we talk and we vent, often times we don't really process the emotions. And so even though we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, this is why we still feel it, and why we can get easily triggered depending on what that person does again, or if somebody else does something similar, we notice that we may get triggered, and they'll bring us right back to that place. And that's kind of a signal that we haven't dealt with some of those feelings. Journaling is a great way to write about what you're feeling. Even getting an emotional vocabulary wheel and identifying, pinpointing what it is that you're feeling, being able to really learn different emotions. Also, I think allowing yourself, when you do have someone like a therapist who can hold space for you, it teaches you how you can, that it's safe for you to share how you're feeling. Oftentimes, we may have had other experiences where we've shared and someone really didn't know what to do with what we shared, and we learned very early that it wasn't safe to share our feelings, that sometimes people can't handle it. And so we have to learn how to deal with things on our own. And some of us are fortunate to have other people in our lives who maybe are doing similar work, and so they're able to hold space. But it's great to have a team of people, really, that can hold space for you and help you to process what you're feeling and not leave you. So even when we think about abandonment, oftentimes we think of people leaving physically, and sometimes abandonment can happen in the form of emotional abandonment, where you share something that's really hurtful, or a time when you were really scared and the other person really had no idea what to do, and even though their body was there and they were listening, they left you. And so we see that happen often. So thinking about ways to build a strong support team or support system, I think, is really helpful when dealing with your emotional health, right? So who are the people that you go to when you need emotional support? Like, what are their names? Have you had a conversation with them? Do they know that you're their go-to person? Do they know when you are having a really hard day? Is there something that you say that lets them know, like, okay, she needs my attention, and let me make time for her, right? It also can be someone like your therapist, someone like your life coach. I also have an acupuncturist, and there are things that sometimes I don't really understand why I process it the way that I do, but I just do, and I accept kind of where I am in the moment. And something like acupuncture supports me in maybe calming, my nerves, or not feeling so anxious. A lot of times we are just so accustomed to dealing with situations and challenges in one way or another, and having these tools help you to find healthier ways to cope with your emotions. And I also included this, if you saw the email that I sent earlier, a feelings formula that I learned a while ago that is helpful when you are talking about how you feel. So it goes, when I think about fill in the blank, I feel fill in the blank because I believe fill in the blank, right? So when I think about, let's see, when I think about, I'm trying to use an example. So when I think about being a entrepreneur, I feel anxious at times because I'm not used to having to worry about, or because I'm used to having a steady paycheck. And somewhere in my mind, I believe that not having a steady paycheck means that I'm not stable, right? So that might have been a lousy example, but to just kind of give you an idea, like talking about what it is that you think, what it feels like for you when you think about it, and then also pointing out what is the belief that you're holding. And you can start to look at the belief that you're holding and really even decide, is what you're believing true? And do you want to change what that belief is? Because really the belief is what is running the tape. It is what's causing you to think certain things, which then in turn makes you feel a certain way. So when you begin to change your beliefs or change your thoughts, you actually then can change how you feel about it. So oftentimes we let our emotions dictate how we show up. And we all know that our feelings just come and go. We can wake up and be in a really bad mood, and by midday, we're feeling great. So our feelings don't dictate what is true about us. It really is what we believe. And so even when we're feeling differently, we can always go back to what it is that we believe. And so thanks. And so that is what I have to share for today. Hope that was helpful, and can't believe that we are almost finished. Tomorrow is our last day. Thank you so much for participating. I'm loving your post. Look forward to seeing your post today. And until tomorrow, be whole, be loved, be free. Peace.